Right, we are rolling. Welcome to the Upside first episode. So, someone asked me yesterday what the purpose of this podcast is, and I guess it's to help those kind of who are overcome by their own limiting beliefs or self barriers. And I want to speak to people that have turned a dream into a reality or come from a dark, shitty place in their life and turned on its arse or made something from nothing. And I kind of want to speak to people that have some wise words or inspiration to give to others that are either crippled with their own self barriers or their own limiting beliefs. So yes, episode 1, welcome to the Upside. This episode is just going to be me speaking a little bit about my life, how I got to where I am, I guess, how I got into this industry and my own limiting beliefs and barriers that I've overcome. So a little bit about my background is, for those who don't know, my name is Ross Line. I'm an online health and fitness coach, and for the vast majority of my life, I was overweight, unhappy, unconfident, and just generally very negative and miserable. And I guess those sort of emotions and that kind of mentality all stemmed from my own physique and what I saw in the mirror and where I was with my own health and fitness and my own physique. Throughout school, I was what you could call the class clown. I guess I seeked my own validation and fulfillment from being the funny one and just generally being a little shit. I was always the one to either get excluded and eventually get expelled. And yeah, throughout school, I was just not happy with what I saw in the mirror. And I grew quite resentful and almost bitter towards the outside world purely because of this. All my close friends in my kind of circle were high-level athletes, mostly in football. But yeah, they were always the ones that had like the six packs and or I was sociable, I had friends, but I was never good with women, and I guess I kind of grew a little bit negative about that, especially seeing all my friends that didn't have that same problem. And I played like a little bit of rugby towards the end of my time at school, but that was mostly just due to the fact that I was heavily overweight and it was the only thing I could really get away with. And then at the end of 5th year, I was basically expelled just because of my behavior being a little shit, and then thrown out into the big bad world. And it was at this point, I was at 17 years old. I just kind of dabbled in different jobs, different industries, different sectors, and found myself kind of just feeling very lost. And it wasn't until eventually I got into hospitality where I discovered drugs and alcohol. And still up until this point, didn't really have any kind of purpose in life, didn't have any kind of mission, or didn't have a fucking Scooby what I wanted to do with myself. So I got that lack of fulfillment and I guess enjoyment out of life. I ended up getting out of the wrong things. So I started going down quite a dark path in terms of just going out multiple times a week, drinking Monday through till Friday, and then drugs at the weekend kind of thing, living paycheck to paycheck, getting myself in debt, and still growing very, very negative. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, 21 years old, I was in a long-term relationship with a female who was the polar opposite. Like one of the most positive people I've ever met. If anyone's ever heard of like The Secret or the Law of Attraction, she was all over that kind of shit. And that was like my first exposure to positivity and the actual power behind it, and how you talk to yourself and how you see yourself is the key to everything, the key to success, and it makes all the difference. Eventually the time would come where we broke up, and then this is where I really went downhill and I started to spiral. And I think for 6 months straight after that, it was just drugs and alcohol. And I had a job where I was still within hospitality, but I was basically up and down the UK, opening bars for this chain, training staff. So I was going to different cities, spending large amounts of time away from home, and the sort of culture with the other people that I was working with was very like out drinking, drugs, that kind of thing. And there was one moment in my life when I was 22 that basically changed everything for me. It was what I call the worst and the best thing that's ever happened to me, because as traumatic as it was, and it is generally the worst thing that's ever happened to me, it's also what forced me to turn my shit around and actually sort my life out and have a word with myself. I don't think I'm really at a point where I want to go too much into detail about what's happened, but basically I was convinced that my life was over. And for, I guess, it would have been 8 weeks straight, I was back home in Aberdeen, and I didn't really venture outside much. I spent pretty much every day thinking that, yeah, my time was done. It was game over. And then didn't really, again, still trapped in that negative mindset. And up until this point throughout my life, I'd always had like a glass half empty kind of attitude and why always me kind of mindset. Almost like victim mentality, but also not really being, only being a victim of like my own actions. And I was just kind of focusing on the worst possible outcome and bitching and moaning and not really seeing the positive or the silver lining in any kind of situation. So going through that 8 week period where I thought my time was up, it was coincidentally on my 23rd birthday, I got the news that everything that I'd feared was not my reality. I've never been like an emotional person. It's taken a lot for me to ever cry. But when I say I broke down in fucking tears of happiness, like, yeah, it was overwhelming, but it was that moment there that made me sit down at my kitchen table. And I can remember this so vividly. Sit down at my kitchen table and I wrote a pros and cons list of my life, everything that I liked about it and everything that I disliked. And I guess the cons vastly outweighed the pros up until this point. Like I didn't like what I saw in the mirror, didn't like my career, didn't like what I was doing with myself outside of my work, didn't like the direction that my life was heading. So there was not anything that I necessarily liked about myself or how I lived my life. So I decided to do something about that. So I thought, okay, well, what's the first one? What's the first thing that I want to change about myself that I think is going to make my life better? Obviously, being an overweight kid, not having much luck with women growing up, and having low confidence and self-esteem up until this point, I was like, right, well, okay, I'm going to get myself in shape. I think in my early 20s, as soon as like the drugs and alcohol was sort of injected into my life, I'd went from being overweight to more having like that skinny fat kind of look. And yeah, so I made that decision that the first thing that I wanted to change was my physique. So I was like, okay, well, how the fuck am I going to do that? Well, I'm just going to start eating better. So like any kind of newbie or beginner, straight onto Google, meal plan to build muscle, things like that. So when I say I went like from 0 to 100, I went proper gym bro mode where I was having 5 square meals a day, oats and whey protein in the morning, chicken, rice or mince and rice, veg, pretty much four other meals. And I just started going to the gym. Didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing. It was overcome with like gym anxiety on multiple occasions, but I just went in and I just done something. It was inconsistent. It wasn't tracked. It wasn't programmed, but it was something. And there was times where I got pinned on a bench press, or there was times where I embarrassed myself and had to fucking leave there with my tail between my legs. But I kept going back because I was like, right, this is gonna be the thing that's gonna change my life. I know that. I've got a strong belief in that. And it did. And the more that I got in shape and the better that I started to feel about myself and the more that I saw progression happening, it improved that self-confidence, it improved that self-worth. And it gave me a little bit of a mission in life at the same time. I was like, okay, well, I'm still working in hospitality, doing a job that I don't necessarily want to be in, but I'm doing something that is making me feel better about myself, and it's actually creating a little bit of positivity in my life. So I'm going to stick at it. And as time went on, I got in the best shape that I had ever been in until that point. And I then had friends asking me for advice. Okay. Just basically how I got into the shape that I did, how I made the improvements, what they should be doing in the gym, what they should be eating, things like that. So I basically just shared what I'd been doing up until that point. And then when I started to notice the changes in them, in terms of not just their physique, but the positive traits and attributes, it made me feel even better about myself. I was like, fuck, well, imagine if I could do this shit for a living. And it's like, well, there's people that are. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to use this opportunity to get my personal training qualification. So I did that just before lockdown. So that would have been end of 2019 in that sort of general area. And then we went into 2020 and lockdown hit. And I was like, okay, well, I'm now on furlough. I have all this abundance of time. I'm just going to try and see on social media if there's any people out there that want free help. So I can get some form of experience helping people. I can't personal train because obviously gyms are shut. Can't do fuck all about that. What I can do is work with people on an online basis, I guess. So just coaching people for free, not really knowing what the fuck I'm doing, but just kind of helping them in the way that I thought that I would have wanted to be helped, in terms of, right, I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm also going to try and educate and guide you at the same time. And that's always kind of been my ideology around coaching as well. So during the first lockdown, there was 5 people that I was working with, different sort of niches or categories they could fit in, I guess, different genders, age groups, professions, things like that. And I got them all into fantastic shape, and much better shape, and improving their lifestyle, and it made me feel incredible. And so towards the end of that first lockdown, I decided, right, I'm just going to fucking go for it. I'm going to go self-employed. So during that period where I made that decision to turn my life around, I became a lot more on top with my finances. I saved a decent bit of money, so I just lived off that for a little bit while making that decision at the end of lockdown to go self-employed. And man, back then I was shit with social media. I was not a social media person, but I recognized that in order to get more clients and for this to grow, it was something that I was going to have to work on. And it did very, very rapidly. Coming out of that first lockdown, I was straight onto Instagram, and things just kind of blew up for me a little bit, in a sense where, like, my PT diary was full, and I was, for the first time in my life, I was fucking loving what I was doing. I was happy every single day. I was motivated to get out of bed. I was going to bed every night looking forward to the next day, which was a completely unknown and unfamiliar feeling for me. And it was just the most fulfilling, up until that point, it was the most fulfilling experience that I'd ever experienced, funnily enough. And so I was like, right, okay, well, this is meant for me. And I still deal with that imposter syndrome to this day, where I think, well, I was a fat kid back then. Like, I should not be in a position now where I'm helping people get in shape and improve their life like that. But yeah, that's my own shit that I'm still trying to work on. But yeah, so I was a full PT by that point. We went into the second lockdown, and I was still took like the majority of those people online. And then obviously gyms opened back up again and things started off. By that point, I made the decision. I was getting better results working online with people because I was able to cover more barriers and just give maybe that little bit more support. So coming out of the second lockdown, I made the decision, right, I'm going to go half online, half PT, have the best of both worlds. And then it was August 2022 August last year, sorry. That's when I made the decision, go full-time online. And there's not a single week that goes by where I don't suffer from that bit of imposter syndrome thinking back to where I was and where I am now. And some part of me thinks I just don't necessarily deserve it, or I shouldn't, I'm not destined to be here. I don't believe in fate. I don't believe in destiny. I don't believe in anything like that. But there's still part of me that tells myself, I didn't go to university. I don't have a degree. I done shit in school. Academically, I'm at the bottom of the pile. And I'm not an athlete. I have zero athletic background. I was overweight. I was unfit. I lived a very negative lifestyle. It's not just imposter syndrome, but it's also like hypocrisy at its finest sometimes, where I feel like I shouldn't be in that position where I'm telling people, or not even telling people, helping people get to where they want to be with their physique, with their eating behaviors, their relationship with food, their general lifestyle, etc. And then there's also the part of me that tells myself that, no, I am the perfect person to help those people because I've been there and I've overcome it myself. And I guess it's going from one extreme to the other, because I went from drinking drugs, zero gym, not watching or paying attention to what I was putting into my body, to then going full send it, where I was gym 5 times a week, zero social life, no drugs, obviously, no alcohol, and pretty standard single ingredient foods most of the time. And I don't think that needs to be the situation for everyone, but it is just a reminder that where you might be right now has got absolute fuck all to do with where you want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time. And what you tell yourself is a lot more powerful than you might think. And I know exactly what it feels like to sort of think that you're stuck in the body that you have, in the life that you have, and it's never going to get better and it's never going to go the way that you want. But I'm not one for motivational quotes or trying to be that like cheesy guy, but fuck me, if I can come from like bare minimum qualifications and zero athletic background to then having like running my own business and working online and being in pretty decent shape, then you can fucking do whatever the fuck you want to do. Doesn't matter where you are currently. And I guess it just comes down to, one, you getting 100% crystal clear what you want to achieve, and then reverse engineering that and saying, right, okay, where you are right now, there's fuck all you can really do about that, but what you can change is where you are going forward. But yeah, folks, I don't want to go in too deep. There is more about my background in my life that I will share at some point. But that was just a little bit of insight into where I've kind of come from, how I sort of overcame things. And I do think sometimes maybe hitting a bit of a rock bottom place, again, it's just seeing the silver lining in every kind of situation, where you can sit and cry about a certain situation or something that's happened, or you can try and see the positive in it. And we want solutions and not more problems. And on this podcast, as I said at the beginning, the purpose is just to give a little bit of, I guess, inspiration or guidance in terms of how you can overcome your own limiting beliefs. And the people that I want to speak on this podcast are perfect examples of how you can do that. So they might be able to give a lot more insight into it than I have, or just different perspectives on how they've went about it. But yeah, I'm going to wrap things up there. That was a little bit of insight into my background, and not just where I am now, but where I was. And again, it just comes down to how you talk to yourself and how you see yourself, and where you want to be has got fuck all to do with where you're currently. So thanks for listening, guys, and I will catch you on the next one.